Florida State player and coaching news.
You are Locked On Seminoles, your daily podcast on the Florida State Seminoles. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back into Locked On Seminoles. I am your host, Brian Smith, longtime recruiting analyst and college football writer. Thank you for making Locked On Seminoles your first listen each and every day. Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet and get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Just visit FanDuel.com to get started. The Florida State Seminoles are not going to be playing in a bowl game, but they got a lot of activity going on. Players in the portal, NIL, players going to the draft, coaches coming and going. This is a very, very turbulent time, but there's a lot of good news to discuss, and we got to discuss things that aren't as positive as well. So let's start with that. Number one, Joshua Farmer had already announced he was headed to the NFL. The defensive tackle is gone from the Noles. Now, his partner in crime, Darrell Jackson, who also played with him in high school, is indeed going to the NFL as well. That's a big hole in the middle of Florida State's defense, but it was kind of expected, to be honest. What we also expected was Azareye'h, the corner, to also head to the NFL, and that has happened. Big news because you've got big holes to fill, and Florida State, you can look at it different ways. They've helped restock the shelves, if you will, through the portal before. Maybe they'll get some guys. We'll talk about more players there coming up. But they did have a good signing day to help in both those areas, and I think the players they got in 2024, like Kai Bates, just as one example, will help at corner this next season. What is also interesting with all these players coming and going is something that is often discussed here at Locked On Seminoles, across other networks, across other Florida State channels, other sites, and that is NIL. Let me give you a backdrop of what I mean by this. Sometimes players will stay in college because the NIL is good. They're in a system they like the place. For instance, Dillon Gabriel had a chance to go back to the West Coast and play for Oregon. He's not necessarily an NFL guy, but he's probably making a lot of money, and Phil Knight is happy to give it to him as the Ducks are ranked number one. Well, Florida State's allegedly ponying up some cash too, and it sounds that way based on how signing day finished. Obviously very good. They got 20 players. I didn't think they'd get to 15. I missed by a mile, but most of us did. I talked to a couple of people, and everybody's shocked at how well Florida State finished. Part of that is NIL, so that is very good news. The other side of that, though, you got to keep your own players. Take it for what it's worth, but Knowles 24/7 was bringing up a topic talking about Amari. The freshman tight end has decided to stay, but maybe it's just me being old school or whatever, but I'm like, he didn't do a ton yet, and they already had to give him money again. At least that's how I took it. I do not know the particulars. That's not a good sign to me in general, but you're a 2-10 football team. Maybe that's part of it. So I'm a glass half empty guy, but I think that's a concern because if guys are worried about where they're at after 1 year, wanting to re-up, or they need an extra incentive, it's going to be tough through the offseason and to get to next season and make major improvements. I hope I'm wrong on that, and I certainly could be. And Mari's a good kid, but if they had to give him a boatload of money, and I have no idea what the details are, that's concerning to me. He's going to be tried out, for lack of a better phrase, on both sides of the ball. I don't know exactly how because the defense is changing. We'll talk about Terrence Knighton taking over as the D-line coach here in a minute, but we also know that the defense is going to be a three-man line. How would they use Amari as a pass rusher? That's the discussion point. Is he just going to be a jack? Is he going to be a linebacker, et cetera, et cetera? I don't know, but those are all interesting pieces. And maybe that's why he wanted more money too. If that's the case, I don't blame him. If you're going to play both ways, you should be compensated for it. When I come back, we're going to discuss something that I think is really interesting, and that's the safeties coach from the 2023 Nebraska team coming over to Florida State, in addition to pot roast coming. That is Terrence Knighton, the defensive line coach. He has been announced. I want to discuss him a little bit more. That is next at Locked On Seminoles. Get ready to tackle NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the National Football League all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the National Football League. Florida State is going to be bringing in Evan Cooper. He is going to be the safeties coach. And before anybody says anything, yes, Patrick Surtain is going to be staying in Tallahassee as well. He's going to focus on the corners and maybe the secondary overall. They'll have to figure that out and work together. But Norvell announced both those things, so that's really good news for multiple points. Number one, Cooper is a Dade County guy. Where's Dade County? That's Miami. He played back in the day in that county. He played at a public school. He's used to the recruitment. He played at Michigan, blah, blah, blah. Like all those things together tell me that he's going to have an understanding of the Miami versus Florida State rivalry. He understands the recruiting wars down there. He understands what it means to recruit in the state of Florida in general. All those things are very, very positive for the Florida State Seminoles. Got to have it. You got to have a Dade County presence. And by the way, Surtain coached at American Heritage, one county north in Broward, and obviously he knows Dade well because of that. This is good. You're going to get DBs out of South Florida if you put effort in general, but having not one but two DB coaches with South Florida ties at some point is going to pay dividends that you can't really put into perspective otherwise. You must have ties to that area. It is a very cliquey area in South Florida. The people that know each other take care of each other. Down there, as much as any place that I've traveled in the United States, and I've traveled just about everywhere in this country, that area is very cliquey with the coaches, the trainers, the players. Florida State's going to benefit from this, so that's good. Also, you're talking about a guy that was a part of a unit in 2023 that 7 of the 12 teams didn't throw for 200 yards. You got to be pretty good. I know it was the Big Ten West, blah, blah, blah. That's fine, but that's still a good number. If you're Nebraska, do you really think they've got a gazillion guys like Miami, Florida State that can run in the secondary the same? Probably not. They had several guys under him that were all Big Ten honorable mention, etc., and they were just effective too. Just watching them the last couple of years, their defense is good. Also, they were just getting better. This wasn't like they came in because they changed the scheme, they caught everybody off guard. This is a defense that was good from the outset and just continued to beat up on people for the most part. There are a few teams that had their way with Nebraska because the talent was too overwhelming. That's fair. But considering what they had, I think they did a really good job overall. And Cooper was a part of that. So here are a couple other things about the whole situation. He's been with the Carolina Panthers, so he's got NFL pedigree. That's going to help you with recruiting, first off. But it's also going to bring more of a true and genuine NFL-based defense into the Florida State locker room. Some of the teams that are doing the best, and it's risky, I will open-endedly admit you this, are the ones that are running a little bit more complex schemes. I don't know if that'll work in Florida State because every school it's different, every different year it really is. But like Notre Dame, that's not a very fun scheme to learn. They're playing at a high level defensively. Texas, they do a lot of different things in their back end too. That is a very high level defense. When you want to win a national title, you can't just go out and run cover 2 all day and expect for it to work. You got to mix coverages after the snap. Like it or not, the kids got to learn it or they got to sit. I don't care how talented they are. There's got to be at least a little bit of that. You can adjust to a certain degree, but Nebraska has shown the ability to do it and teach these kids up. The 3-3-5 is not as easy to learn as some other defenses. They did that overall. And again, Cooper was a part of it. So that's good. Also, we brought up before that Terrence Knighton is going to be a part of the Florida State staff. And I want to reiterate how important that is on multiple fronts. He goes by the nickname Pot Roast. He was a 7-year NFL player. I believe in 8th year he was on a practice squad, but he was a really good player, National Football League level, but he's from the Northeast. He went to Temple. He's a guy that, quite honestly, had to earn his way. He ends up with the Panthers, coaching there. Rule brought him along to Nebraska. He's been a very popular guy with kids on the team. He's had a kid that had some tough times off the field with family issues, and the kid still excelled, so he knows how to deal with young people. And to be honest, because, again, it is a 3-3-5 and you're switching up your defense, pretty much doing a 180 on how it works, you need that guy to come over, especially if you want to have early success. In addition to, now we know Farmer's gone, and so's Jackson on the inside. He needs to get to work and teach these guys up because there's so much for them to install this spring. I kind of feel sorry for the front seven. It's going to be a lot of information. It just is. They probably won't be playing super fast, I would imagine, by the end of spring because the 3-3-5 has got so many moving parts. But it's better that he's here early as opposed to deciding later on, or they brought in a defensive line coach. They didn't have ties to either Florida State or the 3-3-5. Needed that. He's got the personality, the experience. He knows the guys through and through as far as Tony White. And maybe there's somebody else that comes along that's a coach. Who knows? But Florida State did really well there. And, of course, he knows Cooper as well. So Florida State's got an advantage that I didn't think would happen. I didn't think they'd get a big-time DC. They did. I didn't think they'd get a big-time D-line coach. They did. The safety coach, especially because he's from South Florida, that's a bonus within itself. And he's been a part of units that didn't have necessarily elite talent that produced at a high level. Florida State has done about as good as you can expect, to be really honest with you, on the defensive side of the ball. I mean, if you bring in the right linebacker coach or whatever, and I'm not going to go speculate on all the names and all the things that are heard. I've read things on different sites, and I haven't even made phone calls on it because I've been following so much other stuff in football and recruiting in the portal. But I'm really excited that this defense could turn around. They could have a top 40 defense next year, and it would not shock me. Secondary's got a lot of talent. Got two DB coaches working together that, quite frankly, are proven, and they're both Florida guys. This shouldn't be hard for them to adapt to this roster. And then finally, they do need to figure out the linebacker situation, how it's going to work. Maybe Coach White is your linebacker. I don't know how they do that, but they should be okay. And getting pot roast up front. Why shouldn't Florida State fans expect that? And let me go one step further. I will be disappointed if it's not a top 30 defense in most situations. There's a caveat. If the offense doesn't progress, eventually your defense is on the field too much, and it won't be top 30. The offense got to take a step forward, too, for that to end up. But defensively, they've got a ton of guys. And, again, the NIL, based on recruiting, based on Amari, has stepped up. I did not expect that. I thought it was going to be the opposite. If they go get one or two really good defensive linemen in the portal, maybe it's a safety, maybe it's another couple of linebackers, whatever, this could be a really good defense next year. Florida State is way, way out in front of where I expected. I missed this by a mile, and I'm glad. Sometimes being incorrect is the best answer. So hats off to the Florida State administration, Norvell, and everybody for what they have done so far. The defensive side of the ball, obviously getting Gus Malzahn. They get an experienced coach that has direct history with Norvell. He had Norvell on his staff at Tulsa. I think that's also important. And then finally, just congruency. You got a lot of guys that have worked together in some capacity on each side of the ball. That should help you long term. I've never seen a staff that had guys all over the country that didn't know each other and that work. So this is good for Florida State. On Monday, we'll get back into more of the transfer portal stuff. And if there's any coaching news, by all means. But Monday will be a transfer portal heavy day. Might have some recruiting information mixed in. Going to start talking about some of the 2026 kids because there are a lot of players that Florida State needs to get on campus to see these coaches. It is vital. Really going to concentrate on the Panhandle, South Georgia, South Alabama, maybe Gainesville area up north, Jacksonville, because those kids are within a 3-hour to 4-hour driving distance of Tallahassee. Got to get those kids on campus. Absolutely, unequivocally, got to get them on campus. It is a massive recruiting year for the Florida State Seminoles. With that, please hit that like button and that notification bell. And if you haven't not already, hit subscribe. I truly appreciate it. Please share this podcast so I can get in front of more Florida State fans. And finally, comment. What do you have to say about Terrence Knighton, Joshua Farmer, etc.? Curious to hear what you have to say if you're on the YouTube page. Let's hear the comments out there. I would really, really like it. Thank you once again, and you can find me on X at FBScout_Florida. I will see everybody on Monday.